Hello, Professor Iman. So this is my journey mapping and head research video. So we'll start off with the journey map. And it's backwards, so it's a little hard to tell, but I'll explain it. This journey map is going to be a really specific journey map about a specific division of the healthcare industry. Healthcare deals with everything from all of the hospitals to all of your checkups to healthcare companies to patients to doctors. It is a complex system and not one that we can journey map the entirety of it, certainly not one that'll fit on this whiteboard. So I decided to get a little bit more specific about what my problem will end up being or already is, and just discussing where the pain points are in this process. And just a bit of a hint, there's a lot of them. So we start off up here with a patient who's sick. No one likes feeling sick, especially an older patient or someone who's feeling deathly ill. Um, it could end up leading to an illness or a disease rather than just a simple head cold. So, because of how severe this could be, you go to urgent care, which is not really a good thing, but you're in between because you might get the attention you need and might get an answer, a positive answer that this is a simple treatment, so you're optimistic during this process. Then the doctor or the physician on staff might say, let's do an MRI, figure out what's going on. So you're still optimistic because they just need to do a little bit more research. This time it includes an MRI. You're a little disheartened because an MRI does cost money, and your deductible, depending on what your healthcare company is or healthcare provider is, could range anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to $20,000. So depending on which healthcare provider you have, it could be that pain point could be more severe. Then you get the news that you have to go to hospice. So this is disheartening because you'd like to have received word that everything was going to be fine, but it turns out that you actually need severe medical attention, most likely long-term medical attention. So you're in a hospice and you're sick with your disease. This makes relatives, family members, doctors concerned, and most importantly, you're concerned. It's in hospice that the worst of the worst can happen. Typically, people in hospice will either be recovering, which is really good, or they might be in comas for whatever operations they might be going under. They could be sedated, or their own disease or illness could be keeping them in a coma. Regardless, this is when things start kind of taking a turn for the worse. This is assuming the worst case scenarios. So there's a smiley face here only because doctors come in, you, the patient, or your family and friends might feel comforted that he knows what's happening, he knows what to do. But then you get the medical bills. Depending on if you're poor, over 65, or anything not those two, it depends on how much you have to pay. If you're poor or over 65, the government usually picks up the check on your medical bills. So you're not as upset, but if you are neither of those, then you're again having to pay for deductibles. And then you get really angry because of the price, and along with that comes some confusion. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if your family or friend is going to come out of hospice, and that's what this process here shows. The patient is now in a coma. They're in the last 90 days of their life, and everyone's upset because no one knows either what's going on, or they just are disheartened again because they want their family member or friend to come out of a coma or get better. So this leads to sadness. Again, everyone's reflecting on what's going on. It's consuming their lives at this point. I mean, the medical process or treatment process is not a short one. It can last months, weeks, years. The whole time you're waiting for what's happening, and it's stressful because it's confusing, and the anticipation is not what anyone would expect. And then eventually, again, this last part is assuming worst case scenario, the patient ends up dying or passing on, and that is incredibly sad. No one likes to endure that, and that's the very sad but realistic journey map. It's there's a lot of pain points and a lot of problems to tackle. But before we get into specifics, I had to do some head research, figuring out the industry a little bit more. So I used some keywords throughout my journey map explanation to illustrate head research, but I'm going to dive a little bit more into that. So, looking at who's the client, what's the business. The client is you, the patient. In this scenario, you, the patient, and your family members are the ones that are paying for the treatment. On top of that, it could also be your healthcare providers, because they usually, after deductibles, which is just a fancy word of saying, if you have to pay for medical treatment, you're probably not going to pay for the entire thing. And so your healthcare company or your health insurance provider will pay some of that money. Deductibles now are averaging around $20,000 for a treatment, which is no small check. So those are both the clients, and then jargon, as I keep saying, deductibles. That just means what I explained. It was hospice is where the walking dead. I'm going to use this term very loosely, and it's very hospice, to get the point across, is where the walking dead exist. Basically, people who aren't really expected to come out of hospice or come out of the hospital will end up in hospice. These are your deathly ill. As we investigate into more of what hospice entails, we get into something called palliative care. That's basically just a specialized form of medicine where the last, where whatever illness the patient has is life limiting, meaning there's a set time limit on how much their life there is left in a patient. That's primarily all the head research. That a statistic that you should hang on to is in the last 90 days of someone's life, the most amount of medical dollars are spent by the family or the patient. This causes a lot of inefficiency, meaning that whether you measure someone's how alert and alive they are based on brain stem cell activity, if there's very low activity, that doesn't mean they're dead. That just means that the families can continue to do treatments for weeks or months after, and it is incredibly inefficient. And as we embark more on some empathy interviews and some insights, I've got a kind of a rough idea, but I really am looking forward to what's going to occur, because we'll be able to get a more refined idea of what's to come.